Hey Kings, and welcome back to the Augustus Maximus channel, and we are back playing some Hearts of Iron 4 and playing In the Name of the Tsar mod, or the mod In the Name of the Tsar, whatever. And this time we're playing as Austria, and I can't believe I haven't actually played In the Name of the Tsar on this channel yet, because it's one of my all-time favorite mods for Hearts of Iron 4 when it comes to sort of a alternate history scenario where you get to play out, get to play in a world that is shaped by a very different power, sort of in the vein of Kaiserreich and such. But this time, in the name of the Tsar, as the name suggests, obviously it's the Russians that have won World War One due to the Brusilov offensive, and this is sort of an interesting case, very interesting case, because it's a world that isn't so much focused around the Western powers, and I actually like that because in so many mods, and even in the base game of Hearts of Iron 4, it's constantly, about Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire and France and Britain and the United States. And Russia, while always playing a significant part within those mods and within those scenarios, it never feels like an important player, which is kind of a sad thing. It usually plays the part of a country that's supposed to get invaded by Germany or Austria-Hungary or some such nation, and within the name, within this mod, and Kaiserreich to a certain extent, but Kaiserreich is obviously much more focused around the German realm. But In the Name of the Tsar provides sort of a playground if you want to play within Eastern Europe and Central Europe and sort of interact more with Russia. Now, when it comes to In the Name of the Tsar, when it comes to historical focuses, and if you're not playing as Russia, it usually plays out in a very similar manner to sort of base game Hearts of Iron 4. And the only difference really is that the ideology of communism is not exactly very prevalent when it comes to the world stage. You see that Hungary and of course Bavaria or southern Germany has been taken over by communism, obviously, but other than that, not the ideology isn't actually all that present within the world, and which is kind of interesting, because that means that the if Germany and Russia ever go into a war, ideologically speaking, it's very similar to the First World War, where it's just authoritarian or total authoritarian, essentially monarchies going at it, which is kind of interesting. It's kind of fun to roleplay this type of scenario. And that's why we're playing Austria. That's why we're playing Austria. It took me a while to get into it, but we're playing Austria exactly because it's kind of a unique scenario. It's not exactly very different to the German scenario, because you again have to reunite your empire or reunite your country, and you have to tackle sort of a communist threat. It's right on your border, and is a significant portion of the country that you actually have to reintegrate, and yada yada yada. But it's a little bit different because you just click a button and annex Czechoslovakia, whereas with Germany there's this whole focus tree dedicated to those countries. At least I think. I haven't actually played Prussia in quite a while within this mod, because it usually boils down to the same thing. You tend to do the same things over and over again, whereas with Austria, technically you do have the option of not actually reintegrating your empire or your former empire, but that's no fun. We want to go full revanchism here. We want to go full revanchist mode, full authoritarian, and bring back the old Austrian Empire. Because obviously the Austro-Hungarian model has proven to be kind of a failure. We want to have a sort of a more centralized Austrian government this time and try to go full revanchism. And since I haven't played the mod in quite a while, actually, I want to just check out how it's going so far. But it seems to be actually kind of laggy. Hopefully that resolves itself. A lot of these mods tend to snag quite a bit for some reason. Usually when you shift government types and everything like that. That's an issue with Hearts of Iron 4 in general. Whenever you switch governments, the game tends to just lag for a little bit, and probably is because I'm playing on 5 speed, and maybe you shouldn't be playing on 5 speed constantly where in the beginning of the game where there's a lot of political changes and you should be paying attention to what's happening, but hey, whatever. It's not like it's gonna affect us that much, right? One thing that I actually really like about Austria is that you have this whole mechanic at the beginning of the game where you're supposedly going through an election, right? Because you're currently playing a democracy, obviously. And you have to pick the communists here, or the socialists here, but then actually the High Bar storms the government, and all of a sudden you're authoritarian. And that's actually kind of interesting. That's really interesting. It's sort of yeah, it's sort of an interesting way to play the game. It's kind of historical. It's a very role-play-ish. You can get into it very much. You can even pick the options. You know, you can call the socialists red scum and stuff like that. It doesn't actually do all that much. At least I don't think so. But it's actually kind of interesting. It's kind of fun. The picture of our leader is looking kind of strange though, but I suppose they did the best that they could do, and it's actually not that bad. It's kind of interesting. He looks a little bit odd, like his cap is a bit sideways while he's staring into your soul. Very, very vivid eyes that man has, and it's a little bit unsettling maybe, but hey, at least he's not a communist. I think oh, there we go. The German Civil War has just kicked off, and it's the same as usual, even though the Bavarians gain actually, like, insane buffs. And I've never actually played as them, because, hey, who would want to play as that? But, they get insane buffs. They get, like, Bavarian nationalism, which gives you, I don't know, like 15% core defense and attack, or something like that. It's completely insane. They never win. The Prussians always just thrash them. Even if they have even if they don't actually have the best bonuses. I'm not entirely sure why. Again, I haven't played as Prussia in a while, but it's always interesting to see just how dominant the communists seem to be at the beginning. To have some of the best modifiers in the game when it comes to fighting a civil war, obviously, and they have theoretically some of the better industrial parts of Germany because they do control the Ruhr or the Rhineland and stuff like that. And they do have some of the best industrial parts, some of the best parts when it comes to resources, and they do have some insane military buffs. And they always get just smashed, completely just annihilated. And that's actually quite interesting. It's the same case with Hungary. Well, we haven't actually fought them yet, but usually Hungary, when you leave Austria to fight it out with Hungary on their own, the Hungarians sometimes do put up quite a fight, because at the beginning they do have some sort of reactionary forces within the country. And I suppose, I haven't actually played as Hungary, but I suppose you are able to sort of revert from communist to monarchist and reintegrate the empire from the Hungarian side, as it is within the vanilla Hearts of Iron 4 game. And that's actually kind of an interesting proposition. However, I do think it might be a little bit more difficult and tedious to do it from the Hungarian point of view, since you have to switch from one type of government to a different type of government. And I don't know, that just seems like a lot of work, even though you can just do it with Austria a little bit more faster, and you have this whole election thing at the beginning, which is quite fun. So I don't know, might check out Hungary a bit later, but so far it just seems like Austria could be, I mean, I guess it's a little bit less fun because it's like you're just railroaded towards that position. It's the best option. Like you're gonna go democratic and just do nothing for the rest of the game, right? I mean, democracy within Hearts of Iron 4 game mods and just the game in general is such a meme. It's like you never do anything. You just sit on your hands, build up your industry, run out of manpower instantly. You don't even get the best industrial options, you don't get the best advisors. In some cases you do, but, you know, for example with Germany, if you're going democratic, you do actually gain quite a lot of good advisors. But many of those advisors are shared with the monarchist path, so it's kind of meh. But as a democracy, you do gain some advisors that are kind of cool, but not necessarily, and for the rest of the game you're just sitting there, waiting to be the guardian of fun. No fun allowed, we can't have any of that annexation stuff going on, no puppeting, nothing like that, no. Actually, in many respects, in the vanilla game, if you're playing as Britain and you go with Churchill, that's some of the most fun you can have as a democratic power. And that's saying a lot, because even then you can only invade like, what, 3 to 4 countries, and the AI tends to just supervise them, as in puppet them. So it's kind of meh. So yeah, authoritarianism within the context of Hearts of Iron 4, obviously, is a little bit more fun. Okay, so we are about to Anschluss, what's left of Czechoslovakia. And it's kind of interesting that you get to Anschluss both the Czech side and the Slovak side, because Slovakia was sort of historically Upper Hungary, or Felvidek, I think it said. And it's kind of interesting that you get to annex them both. And at the same time, the Hungarians actually snatched Carpathian Ruthenia from me and southern Slovakia, but Bohemia accepts. And Slovakia becomes a puppet. Yeah, so we should gain Slovakia as a puppet and annex the Bohemian side, which makes actually sense within the... Okay. I guess we just take it all then? But I thought we were supposed to... That's a little bit strange. That's a little bit strange. It might be because that I'm not running any submods. So do we just go on like nothing happens? I guess so. So we just took it all. Great stuff. Great stuff, but even the game was like, yeah, Slovakia becomes a puppet, but we just annex all of it. Okay. I mean, I'm not necessarily complaining all that much. It's just a little bit strange, that's all. Might as well make use of their divisions. Might as well make some mountaineers as well, because we do gain some good buffs for them. So, yeah, I guess next on the list is just to take out Hungary, and then we are basically done. I thought I'd be just integrating Slovakia for a while, but I guess not then. Yeah, we just took all of it. Great stuff. Okay, and here we go. It should be time. Yep, eliminate the communist threat. It's time to take out Hungary and finally be done with them, because, well, they took Carpathian Ruthenia and southern Slovakia from me, which is rightful Austrian clay, obviously. And they also have a little bit of a sliver of Austria as well, which is kind of strange, but they do, so there we go. It's actually quite nice. Theoretically, I think it would allow you to go to war with them even if you're playing a democracy or just manually justifying on them, so you don't have to go through the focus tree, because they do own a core territory, so it's also a bit quicker, and the Casus Belli actually lasts till the end of the game. But we're just smashing them, jeez, absolutely crushing them. By Jupiter, these Hungarians really aren't putting up much of a fight, are they? I thought that this would be a bit tougher, but okay, no complaining here. But I mean, we've had the same amount of time to prep, and they even took they Anschlussed some territories for themselves. So, yoink! It's all mine now. Thank you very much. And there we go. It took us like 2 years, really, or 3 years technically, to get this whole thing done. So, I don't know. It seems a little bit slower than in vanilla when you're reintegrating the Austro-Hungarian Empire as Hungary, but quite a lot of fun all the same. Alright, next up we should start thinking about Okay, so they formed their own... Okay, so they just formed their own faction, and I suppose we're gonna go with the Austrian Empire, right? It says we can form Austria-Hungary, which gives me a whole bunch of cores, but we already have those cores, so... okay, that's... this mod's a little bit strange. It's a little bit strange. Maybe that's because... whatever, we're just gonna become the Empire of Austria, as I wanted to at the beginning. So, it's a little bit... yeah. I mean, Otto gets a bit of a debuff when it comes to political power, which is quite strange, because he's now the emperor, right? I mean, it's like a constitutional emperor, but he's an emperor all the same, and emperors are really based, and there we go. But Yugoslavia formed its own faction, and that means, and they're the only members of that faction, that means that we can rightfully completely annihilate them, and it won't necessarily be a problem with anyone. And a long snag here. What's happening? Is someone Spanish Empire restored. Okay, a whole bunch of empires are now being restored, which is actually quite cute. The Italian Empire is here, the Spanish Empire is here under Alfonso. So, yeah, there we go. A lot of empires, but the French Republic is still a stain. Still a stain on the face of Europe. So, hopefully the Germans get around to doing something about that, because I do know that the Prussian focus tree, the German focus tree, does do a lot of stuff. So well, we're gonna claim a whole bunch of stuff from Yugoslavia, and we'll see how that goes. Now that they're in their own faction, should be quite a lot easier. And the Germans are inviting us into the Berliner Pact, which is basically just the Central Powers, right? Or I suppose they do have port rights, or yeah, port rights basically with Japan. So I suppose the Japanese are also going to join that, which means that it's basically just the Axis. However, it's a monarchist Axis, which is kind of like the Central Powers. So yeah, sure. Let's get to it. It's going to be fun, right? I mean, with all the build-up that the Austrians have to do, and the Germans have to do, and I suppose even the Ottomans, kind of. I suppose that we'd be at a pretty big advantage, right? But anyway, the Yugoslavians formed their own faction, the Balkan Shield Force, which is, I suppose it's kind of a cool name. It's kind of a cool name, but yeah, we're just gonna claim a whole bunch of stuff from them, and we're gonna crush them. I think they can invite a whole bunch of members, like Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, and stuff like that, and I'm not entirely sure if it was in this mod or in Kaiserreich, but I do remember that they can interact, or even vanilla for that matter. I do remember that they can actually interact with the Ottoman Empire and drag the Ottoman Empire into a Balkan Defense Shield Force, whatever, or some sort of Balkan Pact. I think it might actually be in vanilla as well. If you go down the communist Yugoslav path, you can turn, well, basically all of the Pan-Slavic Workers' Congress, I think it's called, that faction. I think you can even invite the Ottoman or the Turks into that, which isn't really a Pan-Slavic. Or even if you invite the Greeks or the Romanians, not necessarily Slavic pact at that moment, but hey, whatever. I suppose it works, kind of. And here we go, still in their own faction, nobody's guaranteeing them, let's just go, we should roll over them, no problem. The Hungarians, I thought were gonna be a much bigger threat, but yeah, it seems that we're almost done with reconquering. Only the Russians are left, and hopefully the Germans can help me with that one, because I remember the Russians actually tend to be really overpowered in this mod. They're sort of like the Germany of this game, which is kind of interesting because Russia, one of the big debuffs, even historically, of Russia is that they tend to be a little bit lackluster at war towards the beginning. However, they tend to get their act together, so to say, towards the middle part of the conflict. This is what we see even with, well, historically, obviously, this is what we see with Napoleon. This is what we saw in both the World Wars, obviously. In this game, or in the alternate scenario proposed by this game, they really got their act together towards the midpoint of World War I with the Brusilov offensive. That was sort of, you know, if history has taught us anything, if we were to go purely by the example provided by history, then the Brusilov offensive should have been the turning point, but obviously because of various reasons, mostly due to politics, it didn't actually pan out that way. Not necessarily just because of politics, but obviously because the Russian supply lines and everything like that was just complete trash. But essentially at the beginning of the war they were actually quite decent. So the First World War, when it comes to Russia, very, very different scenario than what we usually see, even ending up in a civil war. Very different scenario than what we usually see. But the United States also going through a civil war against the Confederacy, which is quite interesting. They have a woman president now, congratulations. And very relevant. But there we go. We're going for we're going for the Yugoslavians. Actually, the Greeks joined them. The Greeks joined. Okay, we can just annex it all. We can just annex it all. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. That's yeah, that's not overpowered at all. I guess we fought like one Greek guy somewhere, and that counted as, you know, us having fought them. there we go, the Austrian Empire. You know, Greece was always Austrian clay. I have no idea. I have no idea why that would be strange at all. It has always been this way. It's always going to be this way. And yeah, that's just how it is. And I suppose we're gonna demand all of that Transylvanian stuff now from Romania. Now that we're looking mighty chunky, but also kind of long. Chunky and long. That's a very interesting scenario, and a very interesting way this whole conquest has spanned out. The border guard is looking mighty terrible though, so it's kinda not necessarily very aesthetic. Okay, so I skipped over a little bit. We got back Transylvania. It's now time to take back Galicia, which is, of course, again, rightful Austrian clay. And seeing as the Russians allied the Bulgarians and they're both fighting the Ottomans right now, I think it might be actually quite prudent to just march in there and take them over. But of course the Bulgarians aren't joining in, because why would they? But of course the Polish have no... nobody's asking them any questions when it comes to invasions, and we're just gonna march in there and retake Galicia. Hopefully it's not gonna be that terrible of a fight, because again the Russians are also engaging the Ottomans, and I think they're also fighting someone else, but probably not all, just the Ottomans. But even that should be enough to distract them. They were engaged in a couple of wars before this. They were fighting the Iranians, and they took northern Iran, which is quite interesting. The border guard is terrible, but it's quite interesting. They will be interested in that. And so we're gonna retake Galicia. Obviously, some military police never hurts, and hopefully it's gonna be a very swift invasion, both of Bulgaria and Russia, and Galicia, obviously, because we are only interested in that, really. And I wish kind of that there was a separate peace option, or just like a separate peace option in this game, sort of like there is with the Winter War, where you fight a war because you're interested in certain claims that you have, and once you conquer them, you can just I mean, the game would obviously flag it as a white peace for strange reasons, but you would basically have a sort of a negotiation for those claimed bits of the enemy empire, and yeah, the Russians are just standing there menacingly. But yeah, I wish there was sort of a separate peace option for these sorts of situations when we are only interested in Galicia, really. That's what we claim, that's what we have claims on, that's what we want. And even when you have a casus belli, you usually justify for a certain region, right? It's not a casus belli just in general annex country, unless you have it through a focus tree to have a pure annexation declaration of war, which usually doesn't happen. Usually have just certain states or provinces that you claim, and you want to take those, purely just speaking, when it comes to the focus tree descriptions and stuff like that. So I wish there was something like that, like a mechanic, not necessarily for vanilla, because it's obviously supposed to simulate the Second World War, and however, there were quite a few separate pieces. I mean, there was an option to separate piece. There was a separate piece within the Winter War. Obviously, there was the option of separate piecing between Germany and the Soviet Union. At least it was sort of thought about from both sides during certain times of the conflict. So it's, I think it would be interesting to implement something like that. Definitely more interesting than the spy mechanic, which ultimately at the beginning was looking mighty interesting. But at least I only find myself using it when I need to basically bring down rebellions, or just bring up compliance within certain regions. That's the only stuff. The anti-partisan action from certain spies, that's really the only use I have for the spy mechanic or the intelligence agencies, because it isn't as effective as I thought it would be, and it's mighty expensive to upgrade your spy agencies, unless you're like really preparing for a major offensive. For example, when I was playing as a fascist Spain, Within that video, I used a lot of the spies to bring up the compliance within the United States, because it was an offensive that I was planning for like 2 in-game years. So I just had a lot of time to prepare that. But if you're a minor country, then you can't necessarily afford to upgrade those spy agencies all the way up. And if you're playing a major country, then you can just invade and not really bother with it. So really, sort of the mid power level countries are probably the best when it comes to using the spy agencies, which you know, something like Italy or even Spain or something like that's actually probably the best countries that can be spy masters, because they can't just invade the United States, for example, just out of the blue like that, because it's going to be mighty difficult. But once you bring up compliance, bring down their stability and war support, and, you know, do a few things like that, maybe even instigate a civil war in one of their puppets or something like that. Not entirely sure if you can instigate civil wars in puppets. Haven't really used it that much, but theoretically speaking, Galicia is actually looking kind of murky there. The Russians really are overpowered, and it's kind of turned into World War I again, where we advanced a little bit. You know, we brought down quite a swath of the Galician, I don't know, lands, but haven't really moved the front lines all that much. And I think the same thing is, I might as well use a few planes, but I think the same thing is actually happening to the Germans, because they haven't really advanced against France all that much, and same is happening within the Ottoman realm of interest. They haven't really been pushed all that much, but they haven't really pushed back anyone. The most that we've actually done as the Berliner Pact is conquer Bulgaria. It's quite sad, to be honest, but I think we actually have the Netherlands on our side as well, so it's not exactly the Axis, nor is it exactly the Central Powers. It's kind of interesting that they include a lot of these different scenarios. It's a lot of pushing back. The Russians, they're insane, man. They're absolutely insane. They're at the same time they're fighting the Ottomans, they're fighting me. They're actually pushing, and even though the majority of these battles we're completely annihilating them, at least successfully defending, that is, it's not looking all that great. And yeah, I mean, it's no surprise that a mod centered around Russia, especially Russia winning the First World War, they would be quite strong. But at the same time, I mean, France won the First World War in our like real life history, and they didn't really perform all that great within the Second World War when it comes to the initial couple of years. So it's yeah, they're losing quite a lot, yet not necessarily tearing down all that much. It's not looking all that great. Okay, this is getting a little bit strange. Look at all the territories that fall under the Berliner Pact. We have Germany, we have the Austrian Empire, the United States isn't even in the war. We have Italy, we have Spain, we have Japan also, yeah, engaging against, well, they're mostly engaging against China, but theoretically they're also within the war on our side. Yet we can't bring down France, we can't bring down well, Russia we certainly can't bring down. We can't bring down Britain, and Spain is actually about to be completely overrun. So it's yeah, this is not actually looking all that great. I mean, the entirety of Europe, almost the entirety of Europe's, you know, most certainly the entirety of Central and quite a significant portion of Southern Europe is within the Berliner Pact. However, we can't bring down even France. This is looking a little bit suspect. This is looking a kind of not exactly very very pleasant, so to say. I'm probably gonna lose this one. Okay, it's official. The Russians are kind of overpowered. I've been able to push quite a bit into their territory, but it's such a drag, man. We're basically single-handedly fighting against the Russians. They've lost basically the most amount of men to our divisions. We haven't lost all that much. They're basically losing 10 men per each one of our own, but it's such a drag to fight them. It's they're nowhere close to actually even collapsing. They're really strong. They have some insane bonuses, And this is all just me pushing. I mean, the Ottomans are defending towards the south, but there hasn't really been all that much engagement there from the Russian and the Ottoman side. They're mostly just messing around with the British and the French. Yeah, the Germans are doing absolutely nothing. They failed to take France. The Italians haven't really pushed all that much. I think the Spanish have collapsed. And yeah, this is looking like a big old defeat from our side, which is kind of a shame because I was really hoping we'd be able to swiftly crush the Russians and then stomp the Western allies, sort of a Schlieffen plan. Schlieffen once more, but it's really not happening. So I really couldn't be bothered to take down Russia because it's gonna take until like 1942. Seeing as yeah, they've lost so many men, yet they're still capable of holding so well. And yeah, it seems like if I wanted to play this till the end, we'd be able to, but it's gonna take like additional 2 years. And then the Germans are gonna completely collapse, and when we have to run to save the Germans, that's gonna take another like 3 years to save them from the French, and who knows when the Americans are gonna join. The Ottomans are probably gonna collapse in between. And yeah, that's gonna be a big headache. So I think I'm gonna call it for today here. It's actually really fun mod. It's a really fun mod, but the historical, at least from I've noticed, I've had like one test run. From I've noticed the on historical settings, obviously the AI always does the same thing on same things on historical settings, except sometimes they don't. Sometimes the Americans go through a communist civil war, sometimes they go through an anti-Confederate civil war, as in sometimes they go through an anti-communist civil war, sometimes they go through an anti-Confederate civil war. It's kind of strange when it comes to the Americans, and the Germans obviously always do the same thing. And it's really fun at the beginning. It's a lot of fun meddling within the political side and stuff like that. Maybe it's just the Austrians; they're kind of bland because you have not exactly very few ways of expanding, but the ways of expanding are always sort of reintegrating the former empire, obviously, and that's a lot of fun. However, the initial reintegration is a little bit too easy. While the fight against the Russians, I mean, look at this. This is this is absolutely terrible. This has been going on for years, and they are like what 10% towards capitulation. Yeah, it's not going all that great. So I'm gonna leave it up for today. It's a great mod. I absolutely love it. Love it. The Russians are a little bit strong. However, yeah, that might be because we're not exactly playing a great power. I think we could have waited a few years extra, and this could have gone much smoother. Then again, we're fighting as the entirety of basically Central Europe and Central and Eastern Europe against the Russians and the French, essentially, and it's not going all that great. So take that for what you will. But anyway, thanks, Kings, for watching, and